everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. Use the promo code MAGICMics to get 5% off your next order and support this crazy show. We really appreciate it. And check out our co-sponsor, Mana Traders, the best tool to enhance that Magic Online experience. Use the code MAGICMics_8N4, 8 N as in no, 4, for 10% off your next subscription with Mana Traders. Tell them we sent you, and we appreciate it. I'm Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Power Dragon.
What's up, everybody? Or should I say howdy? Because based on my hat, you know what we're talking about today. It's some Thunder Junction.
It's going to be good. Power Dragon, you might want to scoot a little to your left or move the camera.
We can do that. Sure, why not?
Nice. And Ruben Bressler, right over there.
Howdy, y'all. We'll be your Huckleberry.
That's right. I did, I don't know, maybe just in the theme of it, watched Tombstone over the weekend, and it was a fantastic experience. Super fun movie. Check it out if you haven't. And if you get access to the pre-show, you can hear us talking about it for like 10 minutes. Right. It's great. That said, we begin with our choice of the top comment from the last top 10 in the segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Fallout cards. Ruben?
Well, Rye Burton had a lot of thoughts about a card in the set, and they are the winner this week. I'm very surprised no one had Rose Cutthroat Raider on their list. This is definitely a commander card, but a very powerful one. Rose has a sneaky line of text at the bottom that myself and some of my friends missed on their first read-through. Whenever you sacrifice a junk, add a red mana. Junk being a free impulse draw at sorcery speed is already very strong. Allowing you to ritual as well is amazing. Just because Will is one of the most powerful and ubiquitous red cards for Commander, Rose allows you to do a half-decent impression of it when you attack with anything at the other three players. Rose doesn't have to attack, and it's not a damage trigger either. Crazy. Also, with more cards like Adeline, Resplendent Cathar running around, Rose will find their way into Boros, Mardu, and Naya tokens decks for a very long time.
Rose Cutthroat Raider is a rare from the set, 2 red, 2 generic mana for a 3/2 legendary artifact creature robot with first strike, and it has raid at the end of the end of combat on your turn. If you attack this turn, create a junk token for each opponent you attacked. It's an artifact with tap, sack this artifact, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn, activate only as a sorcery. And lastly, as they noted, whenever you sacrifice a junk, add 1 red mana. And yeah, it seems super dope. It's got a little value on it. And, you know, the people who love to tinker with treasures or tinker with junk, this is your card.
Yeah. There's I think it's like, there's a 1/3 that whenever you sacrifice a clue or a map, or whenever you sacrifice something else, you make a red mana and you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And that one got a lot of hype for Commander.
Oh yeah,
this one not
Crime
so
Novelist.
much. Crime Novelist got a lot of hype in Commander, and this one doesn't. This one didn't. And very similar vibes here.
Yeah, very, very fun. Super cool card. And so thank you very much for being a part of the show, Rye Burton. We appreciate it. Y'all check it out, and congratulations to them. Stay tuned for our top 10 list this week and let us know what card you would choose for our honorable mention for the next set, which is Modern Horizons 3, if I recall correctly.
Unless we do one for Thunder Junction Commander specifically.
Right. We tried that. It doesn't kind of work.
Yeah,
the problem, I think, is that we're not super Commander players, and we wouldn't have as enough insight, I think, to make that great. Either way, let's go ahead and get started here with our number 10, and I'll just get us going because I love this type line. The type line in specific has already got me super excited for Bloomborough because we have a rabbit mercenary, okay?
Hell yeah.
And a rabbit mercenary is awesome, and by that I mean Claim Jumper is awesome. Yep. It's a white and 2 generic mana for a rare creature rabbit mercenary with vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a Plains card, note, not a basic, a Plains card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then if an opponent controls more lands than you, repeat this process once. If you search your library this way, shuffle, it just catches you up. It catches you up in mana. Whether it's a casual game or a competitive game, catching you up to a bad mana draw is huge. It's a 3/3 vigilance for 3, so cool. And white getting this type of ability is incredibly rare.
This one almost made my list. Mostly because it's already a solid statted creature, right? It's a 3/3 for 3, nothing to complain about. But if you even get one land, that's great. But you could get 2 lands, and like you said, it doesn't have the restriction of just being a basic plains, right? It could be a fetch land or a shock land. You know, it could be any of the new split lands that if you need to surveil or whatever, like there's a bunch of things you could use this for. So I don't know where it shows up, but I would not be surprised to see this card getting some play.
Yeah, Knight of the White Orchid was a 2/2 vigilance that did something very similar to this, being a 3/3 vigilance, or sorry, 2/2 first strike, being a 3/3 vigilance, bigger body, and additional upside if your opponent is ramping in some other way. I think is absolutely worthy of inclusion. This was very close to my list. This was very close to something I wanted to talk about on the show. I think this card's amazing.
Fantastic. All right, let's move on here to number 10. Ruben, what you got?
I've got another 3/3 for 3. My 3/3 for 3, though, is a commander that has a really weird thing going on because I don't know that everyone knows what a modal spell is unless you were told what a modal spell is, because it doesn't say the word modal on most modal spells. Riku of the Many Paths is a 3/3 for green, blue, red legendary creature human wizard that says whenever you cast a modal spell, choose up to X, where X is the number of times you chose a mode for that spell. So if you play a modal spell and it says choose 1, then you choose one of the following options. If it says choose 2, then you choose 2 of the following options. And if it says choose 3 or more, you choose 3 of the following options. Either exile the top card of your library until the end of turn, you can play it. So impulse draw. Put a +1/+1 counter on Riku of the Many Paths, and it gains trample until end of turn. Or make a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. We talked about Jessica's Will, for example, during the honorable mention. That allows you to not only get Jessica's Will, but if this is in play, you get 2 of the modes. Good heavens.
Nice.
There's like Return of the Wild Speaker, which is super good in Commander and in these colors. Seems like a really fun build around card. With you just put every card that has choose 1 or choose 2, Cryptic Command, Abrade, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this could be an easy one to build around. There's a lot of choices now because we've done modal cards a bunch over the last couple of years. A bunch of them have shown up in some of the Commander product. So yeah, if you're building a Commander with this, I think it has pretty good uses and probably a fun deck to build, honestly.
The designers at Wizards, they are, they're dying to give you the commander of your choice, the commander that you can really just carve out what you like to do. So if there's any kind of sort of weird trend, they'll jump on the trend. If there's some kind of mechanic, they want to give you the commander for that mechanic. And it's funny because at this point, Magic Design has gotten so modal, they just gave you the modal commander, which is kind of amazing. And I would expect to see more modal commanders before it's over, but you got to start somewhere. And this is a great one with lots of modal spells to include, which will be fun. So that's great. Power Dragon, what's number 10?
My number 10 is just a question of why do we get such big stats? But we have Colossal Rattle Worm. It's 2 colorless, green, so 4 mana for a 6/5 worm. Possibly has flash if you control a desert. It also comes with trample just because. And then when it's in your graveyard, you could pay a green and 1 and exile it to search your library for a desert and put it onto the battlefield. There's a lot happening with this card. I mean, just straight up, if you don't even have a desert, it's a 6/5 with trample for 4, which is probably the largest quality stats we've gotten on a thing for 4 mana with no downside, really. Mm-hmm. If it dies and goes to your graveyard, you at least can ramp yourself up to play a 6 mana thing at some point in the future. So that's pretty sweet. Like, I think the biggest thing on this card is just going to come down to how popular are deserts, right? If they're good enough where you're playing at least, let's say, 8 deserts, then there's a real chance this is going to have flash a lot. If we're just playing 4 deserts, then maybe not, and the value on this comes down, at least play value comes down a little bit. But yeah, it's still a crazy card to have to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, just 6/5 for 4. Let's ignore the text box. 6/5 for 4. That's absurd. That's a crazy thing. Then let's look at the text box and the mana cost. What would you say was a fair power and toughness for this? 4/5?
I mean, 5/5, I think is, that to me is the push, right? That to me is like the push version. I'd
still be all right with
yeah.
Right, 4/5
6/5. Come on, man. And then trample and then maybe flash, and then maybe go get another desert. Like, what are we even doing here? This card is
Like,
incredible.
imagine on your opponent's turn, they're like, I'm going to depopulate. And you're like, cool, instep, I'm making a 6/5.
Right, exactly.
Like what?
And I mean, when you look up the 4 mana 6/5s, there are a bunch of gods that require devotion.
Sure.
There's a Munga Worm from Prophecy. Guess what? It sucks.
About Manga Worm.
Yeah.
Manga Worm's real bad.
Same mana cost, 6/5, with no other abilities other than you can't untap more than one land during your untap stuff. It winter orbs you. You
Thanks,
winter orb
Prophecy.
yourself. You can't Tavern Ruffian turns into one, but it has to turn it into one via a werewolf mechanic, and it doesn't have trample or anything else to do. Stench Skipper is a 4/5 or 4 mana 6/5 flyer, but if you don't control any, at the end of the turn you don't control any goblins, you gotta sack it.
You gotta sack it.
Mhm.
So,
Right. I forgot about Stench
the
Skipper.
oldest school, the oldest 6/5 for 4 was from Planar Chaos. Volcano Hellion was a red mana, or 2 red, 2 generic mana for a 6/5.
Yes.
Echo X.
Oh,
where
I love
X is
Volcano
your-
Hellion.
Oh, I actually forgot about that card.
X is your
Yeah.
life total. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals an amount of damage of your choice
Of your choice. Pick a number.
to
Yeah.
you and target creature. The damage can't be prevented. That's insane. So
It's great.
Yeah, this card just the precedence here it's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented.
Stats, abilities, the flash thing, the extra ability to go like exile it and go find deserts, which is nuts because I already got one desert on my list. They didn't make deserts suck here.
Yeah.
There's some really cool deserts out there. And
This feels like a concession to like, hey, we've made a lot of removal, we've made a lot of sweepers. Like, we know it sucks to play creatures without like hexproof or something. So like, what else can we do? Right?
What's the
Just
most
make
pushed?
them huge and give them flash.
What's the most pushed thing we can do in green that doesn't have a come into play ability?
I was
Yep.
just about to say that. What can we do that doesn't enter the battlefield and do whatever, but you'd still want to play it? You really have to give a lot of stuff. And this is them, I think, sort of saying, how far do we have to go to make this playable? I'm pretty sure it's playable. Let's move on here to number 9. Mine is higher on somebody else's list because it's awesome. Ruben, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is a card that I think I always play this style of card in my limited decks. And this is the kind of card that is the glue that holds a limited format together. And we have a really interesting play on this card because of one of the new mechanics of the set. One of the complaints I had about plot as a mechanic is that you don't usually want to wait. You want to pay and you want to get it immediately. You don't want to pay and then maybe get it later. You don't want to pay and then wait a turn because you're losing tempo, you're losing focus, you're not getting the immediate payoff. But sometimes the effect that you are getting isn't something you want immediately, particularly on turn 2. I love me a Wild Chance. I love me a Tormenting Voice. That is the kind of card that I want in my red-blue spells decks. It just holds my decks together, that kind of thing. But sometimes I don't want to play it on turn 2. I want to wait till I'm flooded. I want to wait till late game when I, need to go find something. And that's what we get with Highway Robbery. Highway Robbery is a generic and a red sorcery that plots for that same generic and a red, which means that you can pay its cost, exile it, put it on layaway, and then cast it as a sorcery on a future turn without paying its mana cost, activate as a sorcery. So you can either do it now or you can do it later. And then it's got the normal Tormenting Voice text. You may discard a card or sacrifice a land. That's actually different. It's even better than the Tormenting Voice. If you do draw 2 cards, you can discard a card or sacrifice a land. So either way, if you're getting flooded and you need to just draw some cards, Highway Robbery is here to help you out.
Yeah, I think the sacrifice a land portion is really big on this because one of the things you run into sometimes is just like, okay, what do I need to hold on to so I have something to discard or whatever? But like here, just like, all right, fine. I'm still going to get 2 cards, even if I just top deck this, which is actually pretty damn solid. Like the only downside is it's a sorcery compared to some of the new ones being instants, but having that flexibility plus the plot option, more than worth it.
Yeah, I think there's an amount of tension, particularly in the mono red decks, which is you don't want to play this on turn 2. But you're not unhappy to play this on turn 4 alongside like a 1-mana burn spell or something, because it just it's going to sit out there. And if you get flooded, you're going to sack a land, and if you got stuff to pitch, or you're looking for a burn spell to kill them, you're probably going to discard something that's not going to kill them this turn. So that flexibility is really cool. And the tension of when to actually plot it is also sweet, while also at the same time, just giving you a tormenting voice with a weird kind of upside, different way to sacrifice things, at sorcery speed. All of those things are great. Like all of those things give you options to play it the way that you want. And, this is the type of card that I would expect a very high level player to like blow people's mind with. You know what I mean? This is the type of card that at the Pro Tour, you'd be like, oh my God,
right.
They plotted like 3 of these and then just like blew up on one turn. And you're like, yeah. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. But the card's great. Power Dragon, what's your number 9?
My number 9 says we're still just trying to figure out where we're going to squeeze all these 4-mana things into our green decks. But Bristle Bud Farmer.
Yeah.
Another 2 colorless green for a 5/5 plant druid, also with trample. And then again, no downside. Comes into play, you get to make 2 food. And then when you attack, if you want to, you could sacrifice a food, mill 3 cards, and then you can put one of those permanents into your hand. Like worst case scenario with this, you play it, it dies, you have 2 food left over.
Right.
Like that's the worst case scenario. You lose your creature, you still got 2 food. But the upside is you're attacking with a 5/5 with trample and possibly putting another card in your hand that you get to use. And it's a permanent, not even put a creature into your hand, which is almost all the green decks are going to have anyway. You only play like maybe 6 or 8 spells. So it's probably going to be lands and creatures. So congratulations, find your land to play your next big monster or whatever. Like this is just a wild card. And it happens to be a plant, which there's a lot of actual plants in this set. So who knows if that's even a thing. But yeah, just a sweet card all the way around with some crazy looking art.
Yeah, there's a non-zero amount of plant synergies that exist in Commander in particular, most notably in Phylath / anything that has Avenger of Zendikar in it. There's a bunch of token synergies that you can do cool things with here. There's plenty of food decks in Commander as well. So that's just in a more casual setting. Oh, by the way, this is a 5/5 for 4 that puts 3 permanents into play. This thing's very, very, very pushed.
I feel like it has 5 power because Shoulder exists, and they were like, hey, this 4/5 should probably be a 5/5. Maybe it started there. I don't know. But anything that makes extra permanents is something to be aware of. If basically the permanent card from among them means like bottom tier, you're generally going to get a land. Like 40% land anyway, 40% chance every time you turn it over is 40%. You're probably going to land. And that's sort of worst case scenario. Otherwise, it's a creature, it's a planeswalker, it's an enchantment, it's an artifact. Like you're able to just draw a card. When you attack this thing, it draws you a card. Think of it that way, and it gets that much better. You'll make more food along the way. Don't worry. Yeah. Let's move on here to number 8. And I spoke earlier and I said, deserts are good. There is a desert on my list and we've gotten to it. And listen, back in the day, particularly for new players, y'all don't understand how good the land Karoo happens to be. And the fact that they later reprinted a Karoo-esque land. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. You have to return a land to your hand, and it taps for 2 mana. So the power in that is that your 2 lands in your opening hand now basically become 3 mana. So 3 lands, however you want to think of it in terms of your mana, but suddenly you'll be able to pick those back up and do things with them. And that's super duper strong. Arid Archway is very, very similar. It's an uncommon desert land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you return a land you control to its owner's hand. If another desert was returned this way, surveil 1. They're even giving you an upside for doing it with deserts. You didn't need that upside. I would play this card without that upside. I want to be clear. But that means you look at the top card of your library, you can put it in your graveyard. And it taps for 2 colorless mana, actual wingdings. So it's a Karoo type land, the same they made in Ravnica, the same that Wizards has said themselves was a mistake because everyone was running them, and the people who knew to pick them early in draft, for example, were always doing better than those who didn't, because these things give you a crazy advantage with just 2 lands in your hand.
Yeah. I mean, I love a bounce land. I think everybody loves a bounce land. If you're a Simic Growth Chamber aficionado, to have one of these in our standard format is exciting. I don't know that it's going to, keep up with, in our Lord and Savior's 2024, but it's great to have. We've got a lot of deserts now that have a come into play ability as well, dealing a damage to our opponent, which triggers crime, which lets us do some other chicanery. Surveil is like a third of a card, maybe a half of a card, just on our land, just for playing Magic. And Wingdings, could be relevant in some older formats, getting to play our Eldrazi. But all I want is to have 2 lands and 3 mana, and that's what this gives us.
Yeah, I think this is another one of the ones that I look at and say, man, how good are deserts going to be? Because if so, there's several deserts that, like you're saying, come into play and do something, and that matters. Like, that's not nothing. And getting the extra surveil just because, like, I don't really know why. Like, we just get it just because?
Yeah.
But, like, that matters for a lot of decks too. So this could be a pretty sweet card, honestly.
Yeah, there's not every desert comes into play tapped. Like it
Right,
wasn't like there wasn't like a whole thing where like every desert has to enter the battlefield tapped. They don't. There's multiple deserts that can come into play untapped. So you're not just sort of skipping these turns or whatever, but no, you're getting that 3 mana for your 2 lands, and boy, that's exciting. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8, speaking of committing crimes, is a great reason to target your opponent's stuff. Not that you need an excuse, but targeting your opponent's creatures, face, hand, graveyard, spells on the stack happens all the time. And so to have a card that rewards you for interacting with your opponent is a great thing. And to have it on a returning creature, which typically this style of creature always sees play, be it something like a Gravecrawler. So, you need to have some sort of barrier for entry to get something back from your graveyard. But Forsaken Miner asks so little of you to be returned from your graveyard over and over and over again. Forsaken Miner is a black mana for a 2/2 that can't block. It's a skeleton rogue. So it's also a mercenary. Not a mercenary, an outlaw. It is a rogue, so it's an outlaw. Whenever you commit a crime, you can pay a black. If you do, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's it. All you got to do is target your opponent. That's all you have to do. It's just an absolutely crazy thing.
It's a skeleton. And you know what? Skeletons have been waiting for just a little bit of extra help, right?
That too.
We got a skeleton lord this set. We have this to go with even tiny bones, I believe. So, like, this could be a part of that actual deck, and maybe skeletons are a thing.
I just think there's a certain kind of excitement. There's a sexiness when you see a card that has been pushed in ways that other cards were pulled back. You know what I mean? There's a world where this would have entered the battlefield tapped, no matter if it can't block, like, because you can't use it for evoke or whatever. You know what I mean? And there's just ways that this, can't come into play. It literally goes from your graveyard to the battlefield versus going to your hand, which I feel like 10, 12, 15 years ago, it 1000% would have went to your hand, and you still would have to pay the mana, and you still have to pay the extra mana to play it and wait till your next turn and so. But this is just like, no, end of turn bolt, you pay a black, it enters the battlefield. Like, please, and it doesn't matter if, as long as I targeted you, I committed the crime. It's the triggered ability. They can't counterspell that. The ability to play, duress, they counterspell, great, pay a black, put them into play. There's 2 in your graveyard, pay 2 black, put 2 of them into play. Like, this can get pretty weird and scary. This is the type of card that, for me, is very exciting because the opportunities are pretty high.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can be like a Goblin Bombardment style effect, where sacrifice a creature, do a thing that targets your opponent. If you have multiples of these, it goes crazy as well. Like, this is one of the stickiest creatures I've ever seen. It stays on the board.
Yeah. Let's move on to number 8, Power Dragon. What you got?
My number 8, unsurprisingly, is a little higher on one of y'all's lists. So we're going to hold on to that one for a second.
Well, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. We'll move on here to our number 7. Now, I have been playing a bug list at this point. I don't know. There's a few different ways to say bug these days. But the one that, you want to mill everything, and you want to have the Souls of the Past or Souls of the Lost or something was the creature that kind of gave the payoff on that. Whole bunch of stuff like that. Insidious Roots. It's the Insidious Roots deck.
Sure.
And Insidious Roots was like, man, if only I had a creature that was a really pushed Gravedigger that also made all my creatures easier to cast. And they were like, here is Honest Rutstein. He's made for your deck. He's here for you. This is the card I want to play and draw all the time. Even if I play in multiples, so I can just kill the first one, just so I can just get that trigger. It's awesome. 1 green, 1 black, 1 generic mana, 3 mana for a 3/2 uncommon legendary human warlock. So it could be your commander if you want. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. What does Insidious Roots care about? Creatures leaving the graveyard. And creature spells you cast also cost 1 generic mana less to cast. That's awesome. It's awesome. Like every one of those stupid little creatures that you play in that deck anyway costs 2 mana. So now they only cost 1 mana. So it's going to be real efficient to both play this creature and be able to play something else behind it. And just when you play it, you get a token. If you got Tyvar out, the tokens have haste and they're tapping for mana because of Insidious Roots. Like it's just, it all comes together. It's like a freaking recipe, man. And this is one of those missing ingredients that they finally have.
For me, the thing on this card was exactly that deck. Of just like, now I can play multiples, and then once you, for every 2 mana effectively, you have black and green, just like, all right, I'll play the other one, this one dies, goes to graveyard, I guess I'll pick up the other one, and then now that I got 3 in cycle, like I just keep going. Like it's like awesome. Like you just get infinite triggers for your Insidious Roots. Now it does take 3 of them or whatever to make happen, but like whatever, like it's totally worth it.
You're milling, man. You're milling. Who cares, right? You're just milling,
exactly.
milling.
Honest is the name of the game here. What a perfect name for this guy. Also, for my money, this is the in a set full of great art. This is my favorite art from the set. I love the vibe. I love the creepiness. I love the angle of the camera here. And yeah, I mean, this Honest Rutstein is garlic. He's not the focal point of the dish, but he goes in everything, and you want as many and as much as you can. I love this card.
Yeah, this card's dope. If I recall, this is one of the first pieces of artwork they debuted for the set because it's just gorgeous.
Perfect.
The vibes are great. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is a card that we're going to see in standard decks, period, full stop. This card's effect almost always sees play in standard. And the fact that we get a lot of interesting choices with what to do with this effect, given that it can also double as a removal spell in some circumstances, is very interesting. I'm talking, of course, of Metamorphic Blast. Metamorphic Blast is a 1 blue mana instant with Spree. So in reality, it's not 1 blue mana. For a generic, until end of turn, target creature becomes a white rabbit with base power and toughness 0/1. And for 3 additional generic, target player draws 2 cards. So for 2 mana, a creature becomes an 0/1. For 4 mana, target player draws 2 cards at instant speed. That's the effect we always play. Like almost always we play 3 generic and a blue, draw 2 card at instant speed. And then for 4 mana, we get both. We get to have our cake and eat it too. So Metamorphic Blast is a mediocre 2 mana removal spell. It is a solid 4 mana draw spell. And it is a interesting combo of those things at 5 mana, all of this at instant speed.
Man, with the way this set lines up, the Zorius control decks could be a third to half like modal spells and be doing all kinds of things, because on every one of them, and this card's another one of those examples, like, all right, well, I already play some cards and I'm just tapping my opponent's instep and drawing 2 or 3 cards anyway. But if I could also kill something off or turn off an ability or whatever the case may be, like, okay, for 1 more mana, why not? Right? Like, this is a pretty sweet card. I could see this being played some too.
Yeah, and do know this is our first spree card. You have to choose an extra mode. You can't just pay a blue to add to your storm count or whatever.
Or
so you
put it in
gotta,
your graveyard. Yeah.
Right, you gotta choose a mode. So you gotta pay extra no matter what happens. But at 2, it's interesting because it's a trick. Great. But at 4, it's great. So you're going to play this in limited 100% of the time if you're in blue. And then it's one of those, it's so good in limited, it could get there in constructed because it's just value on value. And your shoulder, it's an old one, block it, kill it, thanks. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing to do.
Inspiration doesn't always see play, but Chemister's Insight is a recent example of draw 2 at instant speed for 4 mana. And I think that there's enough options here. There's enough variability with turn your opponent's creature into a rabbit that this one's probably, in my opinion, going to see play in standard.
Yeah, I mean, we've had these types in the past, particularly Behold the Multiverse,
Yep.
which was 4 mana scry 2, then draw 2, but you could foretell it for a blue and a generic. So that still made you pay 4. This makes you pay 4, but you get that extra bonus of really wrecking your opponent's attack or block whenever you want, while also drawing cards, which is great. Power Dragon, what's number 7?
My number 7 is one of 2 reprints that actually ended up making my list, but this one was a very needed reprint. People have been wanting this for a while, and probably one of my favorite dragons that I've ever played with, but it is Terror of the Peaks. 3 colorless, red for a 5/4 flying dragon, and spells your opponents cast that target this, they have to pay 3 life. Awesome. And then on top of that, whenever you have another creature enter the battlefield under your control, it deals damage to any target equal to its power. Awesome. Like, especially with the cards we were just talking about, when you got 5 and 6 power, 4 mana knuckleheads that are coming in and dealing extra damage, on top of them having to deal with this 5/4 flyer. And if they want to go ahead and hit it with a go for the throat or whatever, they got to pay 3 life on top of it. Like, this card's just fantastic, and even better in multiples.
Yeah, I mean, this card's spectacular. It was great in standard. It was in a like a Teamer Ultimatum deck. It was in the Omnath Ramp deck. It still sees play to this day in CEDH, for example. Occasionally will pop up in dredge decks in Vintage or Legacy. Because you're getting a bunch of 2/2 zombies out of your bridge from below. So there's some interesting stuff to go with there. I see no reason why this wouldn't continue to have an effect in current standard or timeless or any of the other various myriad formats that this is going to be entering.
Yeah, this is one of those sort of watershed moments or whatever where you're like, damn, this is the best 5 mana red thing we've ever seen, because it doesn't have enter the battlefield ability, which was important because you had to say, how good did it need to be? Well, when you have to pay life to target it, or literally anything else for free deals damage equal to its power to any target. It doesn't say another creature, doesn't say a planeswalker. You can deal it to their face. That type of ridiculous upside on upside on upside is why that card was like $30, before this reprint. And this is already looking like a $20 bill, if not more, because it does everything. It's scary as hell. No one wants to let you untap with this thing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's actually playable in standard and super popular in Commander. So lots of people are going to want this card. This was a very exciting reprint to have.
Great reprint. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that when you see a lot of infinite combos or infinite damage combos, don't be surprised when Terror of the Peak shows up. All right, let's move on here to number 6. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is the only higher on my list.
Well. Power Dragon, what's number 6?
Well, we were talking about skeletons a while ago, and I got Gissa the Hellraiser. 3 colorless, black, 4/4, legendary human warlock, so happens to be an outlaw randomly, has ward of 2 colorless and pay 2 life. So kind of a double dinger on the ward there if you want to try to kill it. And then it gives all skeletons and zombies +1/+1 and menace. And then, if that wasn't enough text for one card, whenever you commit a crime, you create 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. You can only trigger this once each turn. They are tapped zombies, though, so there's that. But
okay,
my goodness, this is a lot, right?
Yeah.
You commit a crime, you get 6/6 worth of creatures, right, that have menace on top of it. It's a hard creature lord to kill. It's a 4/4 body. And it helps zombies as well as skeletons. So you can kind of play some off cards in your build to fill in some gaps if you want to. Like, this card, I think, is always going to be popular, always going to be worth something. Pretty much every zombie lord in the history of Magic has always had value. Like, I don't think that's ever not going to be a thing. So, like, yeah, this card's pretty exciting all around.
Man, there's just so much going on with this card. Like, it's already impossible to kill. Then if you're able to trigger its effect even once, even just on your turn, the turn you play it, that's 8 or 10 power for 5 mana. And then if you're able to do it on your opponent's turn as well, that's 14 power you're untapping with. There are lots of free ways that people are already playing to get crimes to trigger. Agatha's Soul Cauldron is the one that comes to mind as maybe the easiest to get to work.
Oh, Graveyard Trespasser, Liliana,
I've got a good one for you. I think ultimately, Ward is the best thing to happen to creature design in years. And years and years. Now, I don't think we've kind of really recognized it. At least I haven't sort of until now, which is Ward is an incredibly powerful tool for them to make creatures look scary, looks better than they are, look and make them better than they are, make them better than just 5 mana would be. Now it's okay. Yeah, you can Doomblade it, but you got to pay 2 life and 4 mana for that Doomblade. And there are plenty of ways, as you mentioned, to trigger it. My favorite is in the set. If you haven't read Tiny Bones Joins Up.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
This card is sick. It's a black rare legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, any number of target players each discard a card. Cool. But whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield, like Gisa, under your control, any number of target players each mill a card and lose a life.
Nice.
So
that's perfect.
Boom,
Hell yeah.
boom. All goes in the same deck. At least I would. And
yeah.
It just works, and I think that is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, pay 5 mana, get you a 4/4 and 2 3/3s. That sounds good.
That are hard to block.
Yeah, it's like I'm down with it.
Yeah,
what a card.
Yeah, that card is super duper dope. Now for my number 6, we have spoken about this card before when we were talking about sort of pick our favorite 3 cards to talk about for the week and so on. So I won't go too far into it as we had, but I still love the freaking card and I still think it's going to see a ton of play and it's very exciting to me. It is Avon Interruptor, or Interruptor rather. For 2 white and a generic mana, 3 mana for a rare 2/2 bird rogue. It has flash and has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you exile target spell. That means something on the stack. It becomes plotted, so its owner may cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost. And spells your opponents cast from graveyards or from exile cost 2 generic mana more to cast. And so that just hits all sorts of weird random stuff. It stops their flashback from being, from costing, 2 more. It messes with the card that you exiled. If you exile a counterspell, that card is dead. There is no counterspell that's going to work at sorcery speed. So this card is just fantastic.
Yeah. All of the fact that this is effectively counterspell or counterspell a mid-combat trick, is such valuable information attached to an evasive flyer is incredible.
It
monocolored
really messes with your opponent.
Yeah.
They could be setting up something. Maybe they're trying to kill one of your things. They want to draw cards. Just so many things that this can interrupt and just flip the script on a game very easily. Imagine even during your instep, your opponent's like, all right, I'm going to leave this mana up so I can do this sweet thing and kill off your stuff or whatever. And you're like, no. I'd rather just have a 2/2 and we're just going to let that die on your turn or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of silly things this can lead to.
It's also a time walk against a Wrath. There's so much going on here.
Yeah, this card can just save you in a variety of really cool ways, and as a reaction, right? So it lets you kind of keep the mana up to see what you want to do with it, and then nope, get that out of here, thanks. And then your entire turn you get to have it. Return it to your hand. Well, there's plenty of return to your hand stuff. So great card.
And older formats too. If you're talking about flashback stuff or breach type decks or whatever, this just shuts that down because everything costs 2 more mana now.
Right, it just randomly hoses the hell out of them, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
So my number 5, the ceiling is real high. The floor is real low on this card because we have seen this style of card be real bad in the past. But we've also seen this style of card be real good in the past. For every time that there's been a Dark Confidant or a Glint Sleeve Siphoner as a 2-drop in your black deck that draws cards at the cost of life, there's been a Pain Seer. There's been some bad stuff. So there's a low floor, but there's a high ceiling on Caustic Bronco. Caustic Bronco is a generic and a black for a 2/2 for a snake horse mount. First mount of our list, I think.
True.
And it has Saddle of 3, which says tap any number of other creatures you control with power 3 or more. This mount becomes saddled until the end of the turn, and you can only saddle as a sorcery. Whenever Caustic Bronco attacks, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. You lose life equal to that card's mana value if Caustic Bronco isn't saddled. Otherwise, your opponents lose that much life. So there's some interesting things to be done here. You don't even need to do any tricks with this card. It's just card advantage, right? Like you play your Caustic Bronco, and then you play your 3/2 for 3 mana on turn 3, and you draw your card, and you take your lumps, and you take a little bit of damage, or you draw a swamp. Who cares? But if you saddle it, your opponent loses that much life. And there are a couple ways to put real expensive stuff from your graveyard on top of your deck. So there's some interesting, hilarious, like bolt your opponent with like a, I don't know, like a Scion of Draco situation that you could do with Caustic Bronco. But you don't need any of that garbage. You just are a 2/2 for 2 that draws a card. That's all we care about.
Yeah, I think what makes this better than some of the other mounts is they mostly only have an upside when they're mounted, right? This one is one it's just like, well, even when you attack, you're gonna get an extra card, right? So if you build around the low cost kind of hyper aggro type situation, all right, you're taking 0 to maybe 3, whatever, that's fine. But the upside is you now also have a chance to just ding your opponent for that much mana or damage as well. So this is a cool card just on its face. And maybe if there is a mount deck, this is one of the key pieces to it.
Yeah, I want to believe. I'm very X-Files here. I
know. I want to believe.
I understand.
Too. I
understand.
Do. I've been burned so many times by so many pain seers of the world, and I'm just like, okay, late game top deck, not great. You know, anything they play a 2/3 for 2 mana, also not great. You know what I mean? Like there's a bunch of tiny weird ways that this can make you suffer for it. But I also want to believe that there's some way that you have some cheap removal. You got some ways to saddle it. You got some cute stuff you're doing. Just get card advantage out of it, and you're not worried that you're not trying to do like Emrakul or Silence Drake on top. You're just trying to draw some extra cards in your aggro deck. And I'm cool with that. I want it to work. I do desperately would like for this to be good. All right. Power Dragon, what's number 5?
I think this is my first spree card here of this list, but Great Train Heist. It's a red mana plus as an instant. Our pluses are 2 colorless and a red, untap everything, get another combat phase, which is always fantastic. You could pay 2 colorless and creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain first strike. Or you can pay just 1 more red mana, you choose an opponent, and whenever creatures you control deal damage to that player, you create a tapped treasure token. I like every part of this card. Like giving everything +1 and first strike, fantastic for 3 mana. We've had different versions of that, not a real surprise. Getting the extra ability to get treasure is also kind of sneaky good if you're trying to ramp up or you care about getting treasure, because we have stuff like the new Magda or whatever that can turn treasure into scorpion dragons or whatever the hell. Like there's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do with treasure now. And honestly, just getting another attack step, right? Instant speed, super sweet. Like nothing wrong with that at all. Like now does get a little pricey if you're going to try to do all of them at once, but any one of these or even 2 of these is sometimes going to be enough to turn the game around for you.
Yeah, this is an effect that more than half the time is at least a $5 card. Savage Beating, Aggravated Assault, Morog, Fury of Rakoam, Aurelia the War Leader, Breath of Fury. Like you're gonna see this because you want to beat them to death with your dudes. You want to untap all those guys that maybe go with different opponents when you're in commander, or you're just trying to finish them off with one giant swing. And this also kind of ramps up bigger and bigger, where if you're able to pay 4, you get the extra untap, combat phase. Great. You're able to pay 5, or you're able to pay 6 rather. It's going to get nuts with +1/+1 on first strike. And with 7, you're just like doing whatever. You're just like getting crazy and making permanents, and it's awesome. And yeah, this card's already $3+ pre-ordering as a rare. I would expect it to be even more expensive moving forward.
Yeah. Relentless Assault is 2 generic red. And that's just one of the options that we have on Great Train Heist. I actually think that the turn 2, after like you play a turn 1 creature, and then turn 2, you just make a tap treasure token, is not unreasonable. Like Great Train Heist doesn't have to win you the game when you cast it. If you just have nothing else to do on turn 2, and this lets you play a 4-drop on turn 3 in your mono red deck, that's pretty great. In addition to the fact that there are so many modes. You've got 2 mana, you've got 3 mana, you've got 4 mana, you've got 5 mana, you've got 7 mana. Like, this fills your curve in every which way possible.
Like, Monastery Swift Spear does still exist.
That's a good one.
True.
It also is real dumb stuff when you start giving it more combat steps and triggering prowess. So yeah, card is really sweet. For my number 5, this is, there's a certain amount of like joke cards that I enjoy. I could put up with, you know what I mean? Like there's Holy Cow in this set. I'm pretty confident none of us have it on our list, but Holy Cow is an example of, it's a little silly. We all get it. It's fine. Well, look, man, sometimes you don't need the divine intervention. You need the bovine intervention. All right. It's a white and generic mana, uncommon instant, destroy target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 2/2 white ox creature token. And we've seen so many of effects like this. Give them map tokens, give them clue tokens, now give them a 2/2 white ox creature token. And yeah, it's just a fantastic removal spell, destruction for artifacts or creatures. You can have a 2/2, you just don't get to have your best creature anymore.
This effect is always good.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you're ever going to be upset at this card. Interestingly, it does hit artifacts where Get Lost does not. So that's actually kind of a thing that some decks may want to fill in. You can also target your own stuff in a pinch when you need a 2/2 to block with or something. I don't know, like you need to trigger something. Like that's an option. So like it's a pretty sweet card, and it's only an uncommon, so it should be easy for everybody to get their hands on if they need one.
Yeah,
this was my number 6, by the way.
Really? Oh, nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm in love with this card. This effect of do something huge and targeted, but like you have a huge x-axis, like Beast Within, Generous Gift, Swan Song. This effect is always good. And the fact that you're only giving your opponent a ground pounding 2/2 ox is amazing. I do like the joke that we have here of bovine intervention. And it's also notable in the lore of Magic the Gathering, we have Holy Cow and we have bovine intervention. So we have sort of a Hindu attitude towards cows where they are usually divine in nature, which I think is noteworthy at least.
Well, man, per the flavor text, no one could prove the ox did it, but no one tried to harness it again either. So.
Yep.
We had an awkward interaction with a strange ox on our Baldur's Gate stream, so it's nice to see the oxen. It's nice to see the oxen on our side for once.
Very nice. Let's move on to number 4. Ruben, what you got?
My number 4 is another. It's a boring one. It's another boring card, but it's gonna see play, and it should be on our list for posterity's sake. Scorching Shot is going to be the 2 mana red removal spell by which all creatures are judged. For red, you get a sorcery that says deal 5 damage to target creature. It's easy peasy. We get rid of a Shale Dread. We get rid of that 6/5 Trampler. We get rid of that 5/5 that makes food. It does all the things you want. It kills a creature dead.
2 mana. Yeah. I mean, 2 mana, deal 5. Like, I mean, not flexible, so it has to be just on a creature. It doesn't hit a planeswalker. You know, right now, a lot of decks are playing, I think it's Witchstalker's Frenzy, which can be used offensively or defensively because it's an instant. But yeah, it's still hard to argue with just 2 red mana, deal 5. Like, this kills damn near everything.
This kills Sheoldred. That's what it needed to do. They want to give you as many Sheoldred outs as possible that you can possibly find, and this is a way to do that. While also just killing basically everything else. There are certain sort of watermarks, not watershed, I was one in earlier, but watermarks where you have where it's like, look, the toughness to look at in standard is 5. That's the toughness you need to care about. So the removal spells, if you want them to be good and used and see play, they got to deal 5 damage. They got to do -5/-5, or they're just not going to see any play. You got to kill Sheoldred. So if it doesn't kill Sheoldred, maybe you should design something else and try to figure out something else will kill Sheoldred, because
they've set, it feels like, for the last couple of years, 5 as being the like benchmark for big creatures, right? There's the 6/5 vampire or whatever.
Yep, Vein Ripper.
Vein Ripper. Yep. Yeah, obviously we have the new 6/5 worm. We have Shieldred that's a 4/5. Like there's a bunch that just hangs around that toughness that's like that's kind of the important number. So
Right.
you got to be able to deal at least 5 to kill some of these things, sometimes more, but at least 5. And this does it pretty cheaply.
Yeah, we're on the power, creep incline, whether we like it or not. They still haven't power crept past Moxon, which we appreciate, but we've power crept past Savannah lines, a long time ago. And so as those numbers continue to go higher and higher, there's going to be more life link, more life gain, and you're going to see more benchmarks like this toughness being the toughness you need to target with all of your removal. So, and I love that stuff. I think that's cool. Power Dragon, what's number 4?
My number 4. This is kind of like if you start predicting magical Christmas land, what can we do with this card? And it's Smuggler Surprise. Another spree card that starts with 1 green. It's an instant. Pay 2. Mill 4 cards. You put up to 2 creature and or land cards from among them of the milled cards into your hand. So a quick way to just like reload your hand cheaply for 3 mana. You can pay an additional 4 colorless and a green. Just put 2 creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. Like at instant speed just because. Or you can pay just an additional 1 colorless mana and creatures you control with power 4 or greater have hexproof and indestructible. Man, I love this card. It's one of those things like once you start thinking about like what's the upside, like we can start thinking stupid things, right? But even just at its base, you just pay 5 mana to make any monster in your hand an instant speed inclusion onto the battlefield, right? It could be I don't know. It could be a Tyrannix Rex, right? At instant speed. It could be a Titan of Industry, right? Like these are real cards that people play that you could just get onto the battlefield. Or like we're just talking about, maybe it's a Terror that peaks during their instep, and then your turn, you just drop some fatties and end the game, right? Like there's a bunch of things you could do with this. And giving those things hexproof, because that's usually what you're worried about saving, from a sweeper. You're not worried about the small things, but you could save like 2 big creatures for just 2 mana. That's pretty sweet too. It's almost like a heroic intervention, sort of, just for your big stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is a cool card. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I don't know why we're doing the Trojan horse in the Western set.
Yeah.
It's
because it's a horse, I guess. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make much sense.
Because we've done Trojan horses already, multiple times, right? Like, it's not.
I'm not huge on the art for Smuggler Surprise, but
look, the card itself is bananas. The card itself is just like Tooth and Nail ++. Yep. 6 mana, drop 2 things. 3 mana, mill some cards and put some cards and creatures from them into your hand.
Right.
If you pay all the mana, if you pay with the 9 mana for all of this, you do the mill thing, you put them in your hand, you put cards, because you do it in the order it's listed, so then you put the cards in the battlefield, and they're hexproof and indestructible, and you laugh your way to the bank, because you just paid 9 mana for a spell. You better be winning the game. Yeah. So yeah, this card is cool. It ramps in weird different ways. It provides really cool utility, which is the best thing about all modal spells, is that, they made a Swiss Army knife mechanic, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you're usually casting this for 6 mana to dramatic entrance some Galta into play at the end of your opponent's turn, and then going to town. I love that.
Yeah, and look, we're not done with the spree cards, because my number 4 is one, and we talked earlier about drawing cards and making things rabbits. Look, man, I'm here for the best damn cancel I've ever seen in my life, and that's 3 steps ahead. It's 1 blue mana for a spree instant, so you must choose 1 or more additional costs. But for an extra blue and a generic mana, so for 2 blue and a generic mana, you counter target spell. You cancel. Cancel was a magic card. It was a whole card. It wasn't just one of the 3 modes on a card, it was the whole card. So that you can also, while you're at it, for a blue and add 3 generic mana, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control. Artifact or creature. You didn't even need the artifact part. I would have been just as happy to make copies of creatures at instant speed with this thing. Okay. And if you just add 2 more mana to it, or you just want to pay, divination mana, blue and 2 generic mana at instant speed, you can draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So if you want to go just ham, we're talking what? This 5, 6, 7, 8 mana to do all the things? But really, I think you're just going to be making clones. You're going to be making, token clones, or you're going to be countering spells. Both of those things, awesome things to be doing for just this 1 spell. Just this 1 card.
Yeah, this was my number 8, and it made my list, but at the same time, F this card, man. Like, this thing's
Yeah.
like, I mean, you're already gonna have just the pain of having your spell countered, but now they're also gonna draw a couple of cards just because it's only 2 more mana. Or, they counter something and they copy something, and now you're like Stonewall from attacking or something stupid, right? Like, this card is very silly. I'm kind of surprised it's pre-ordering for under $5 in some places. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't really love to play a cancel in my limited deck. I wouldn't really love to play a catalog in my limited deck. But I wouldn't kick this one out of bed for eating crackers. And I like the effect of having a mid-combat copy effect. You get to do all the things a good amount of the time in limited too. So very solid card.
Yeah, my favorite part about more or less all the spree cards is that they're generally all good in their own little ways in the early game, but late game, they're fantastic top decks. You're like, oh, this is going to change everything because now I got the mana to do all the silly stuff.
And a bunch of them are instants.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part. You get to do all these things at instant speed. Like, it's crazy.
Now, if we move on here to number 3, my number 3 is a card that I have not seen like anyone talk about. Like, I was going through, I was reading the set, and I was going, whatever, it's fine. And I read this card and I was like, wait a minute. And I read it again, I looked at it, and I thought about it. And not just that, but also other cards in the set. There are many cards in this set that do things that say make tapped treasure tokens.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? So you can't just get that mana immediately. So what if there was a card who didn't give a damn if they were tapped or not, and you can do some really sick stuff with it? And that's Magda, the Horde Master.
Yeah.
For red and generic mana, it's a 2/2 rare legendary dwarf berserker. Whenever you commit a crime, make a tap treasure token. It only triggers once each turn. Don't care. Not important. The second ability is bananas. Sacrifice 3 treasures, : Listen, that's not untapped. That's not sorcery speed, or it is sorcery speed, but it costs no extra mana whatsoever. It's just, you got 3 treasures, no matter what they look like, no they're tapped or not, sack them, and you make a 4/4 red scorpion dragon creature token with flying and haste. Y'all, you're sacking 6 treasures for 2 4/4 flyers with haste. Let's go. Like, evasion and haste. You can only do it as a sorcery, whatever. That's the only time you're going to want to do it. You're going to do something really dumb at the end of their turn, or you're going to make a ton of tap treasure tokens doing something on your turn. There's a red X spell in this set that your excess damage is tap treasure tokens. Oh goodness, if only there was something I could do immediately with those after I burn your thing for 1,000,000. Is this card can just jump out there, make hasty guys, and kill them out of nowhere. I love this card.
Oh, green and red already have plenty of ways to make treasure, right? You've got Gala Greeters. Hell, you have Atsushi that if Atsushi dies and you have a Magda, you just get another dragon, right? I mean, like, you can get the treasure and immediately turn it into another 4/4.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? You have the 2/3 that like has menace that if you connect, you get to make a treasure.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Face breaker.
Yeah, there's so many things. So, yeah, this could just be a great top deck in the sense that you might be sitting on 6 or 8 treasure with nothing to do with it, just waiting to draw that Magda, and then there you go. Your opponent
invest in Magda futures, getting those treasure tokens. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Brazen Outlaw from Kaldheim. By the way, Brazen Outlaw, not an outlaw because she's a berserker, unfortunately. But this is just such a sicko payoff, and it doesn't say only do it once. It says sacrifice all your treasures, get these 4/4 haste creatures. So if you're like doing some sort of dockside extortionist shenanigans, or any way you're getting your treasures, you can just wait until you draw your 2 mana finisher.
Yeah, this card is so good. I love it. Whenever you can do something for free, you can make this thing happen as long as you have these 3 things to sack. Bruh, you got to be careful because that stuff can get wild. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card that I love, and I'd be so sad if this didn't end up seeing play up in some sort of deck. The last time there was a sorcery that drew 3 cards and lost you 3 life for 3 mana that I recall is Painful Truths, which was a staple of the standard format at the time. And now we have Insatiable Avarice, which does that effect in 1 color and has another thing attached to it. Another spree card. You're number 9? Nice. For 1 black mana, sorcery with Spree, you can either pay 2 generic to search your library for a card, then put that on top after you shuffle, or black, so 3 total black mana, draws you 3 cards and you lose 3 life, or for 5 mana total, you do both, getting the best thing out of your deck, putting it on top, drawing it and 2 other cards.
And note it does say target player for that
Yep.
second ability.
True. Could just
Sometimes
burn
it
somebody
matters.
to death. Yeah.
I've done it with Sign in Blood. Like,
Hell yeah.
and literally, I was looking at this the other day. It doesn't matter how many times they print Sign in Blood. That card's worth money. That card's worth like $2, $3. Doesn't matter what kind,
Perfect.
what version, what release, what expansion. This thing is 3 mana, draw 3, lose 3. They draw 3, they lose 3. Sometimes you want them to draw cards. Sometimes you want them to have cards in their hand. There's a whole way, like a variety of this to happen. And again, it's a killer top deck in the late game. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, and it's a fairly reasonable cost, even just for the tutor option, right? You don't get it till next turn, but our options these days have all been kind of like 4 mana anyway, right? Going back to like Diabolic Tutor or some kind of upside, but requires more black mana if you're playing like Beseech the Mirror or something, right? So there's nothing wrong with this card just as a base to just tutor up something, right? And if you're playing a deck that you're building around a particular card, then you can even just play this, and it's almost like having 4 more copies, right? To make it even easier to play what you want. So I like this card.
Yeah, I mean, you have your Diabolic Tutor, and like this is kind of like the Vampiric Tutor version, right?
Yeah.
Where it's a little cheaper, but you're still not going to have that same rate. But again, when I went to look at Sign in Blood, and I'm like, wow, everybody, how many times have they reprinted that? And it's worth what? This is already pre-ordered over $5 for a reason. That's just
I've never done the Sign in Blood challenge, but the lore is that if you kill somebody with a Sign in Blood with life loss and decking them at the same time, if they die to both effects at the same time, they have to sign your Sign in Blood in blood.
Okay.
I don't know if we can
I don't know.
technically
I don't
say
know if
that's
that's legal.
okay.
I don't know if that's a thing that you're allowed to do.
Talk
but,
to your medical provider about ways of getting your blood out.
Without the express written consent of Major League Baseball.
Exactly.
Come on, Ruben. The pandemic happened. We all have sanitizer and stuff now for a reason.
All right. You know what? Never mind. Don't actually do the Sign in Blood challenge.
But you can have them sign your Sign in Blood, which I still think is cool because you got them that way.
There you
go. Power Dragon, what's number 3?
This is the other reprint for me that made this list, and it's Archangel of Tides.
Ooh.
Colorless and 3 white, so 4 mana for a 3/5 flying angel that has 2 really interesting abilities. So as long as it's untapped, anything that attacks you or Planeswalker has to pay an additional 1. Or when it's attacking, if they choose to block, every blocking creature has to pay an additional 1. This thing, I think this is an interesting card because I thought about this, that the first time it was in standard, it wasn't insane or anything, but I think the way we played Magic is different, right? Now we have a bunch of token decks and all this other stuff that this kind of shuts those down, right? Who cares if the Boros tokens player has 5 dudes if they can only attack with 3? You don't really care. You're right, cool. A couple of 2-power knuckleheads are going to attack me, whatever. And in multiples, this becomes damn annoying.
Yeah.
Honestly, especially if you're attacking with 1, blocking with 1, your opponent has to leave mana up to do anything about it. And the interesting thing is, I don't know if this even goes in an angel deck other than just because it's an angel, and I will say though, if you're able to get what's her name, Jada on 2, then you have this as a 4/6. You almost can't remove it easily, that becomes it's a pretty strong card overall, and 5 toughness, like we're talking about again, it's kind of like that barrier that it's going to be pretty hard to deal with. So really cool card overall. Nice reprint.
Yeah, it does suffer a little bit from the fact that, the 3/5 as it was in Magic Origins was, I think, way more impressive, as it were, in terms of a sort of a wall, you know what I mean? Because I think back then kind of 4 toughness was very sort of magical, was very targeted back then. So 5 toughness makes it a little less exciting when Scorching Shot exists, for example.
Sure.
But the fact is that with so many token decks, and I play against them all the time, this is a stop sign. This is, you choose to attack or you choose to play spells. You can't do both anymore while this thing is untapped. And if you play a second one, good luck ever attacking, because it's just going to be too much to start with.
Yeah. I love an Archangel of Ties. I love this card. The Giada angle is the most interesting one to me because that puts it up to 6 toughness and also puts it out on turn 3. So that could be a very interesting standard deck for sure.
Yeah, that does sound exciting. All right, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
I'm going to stop messing around. All right. I've got all my commons that are going to be good and limited. I got all my uncommons that have good value. There's no more messing around here. This is a mythic card that is, I think, the most insane mythic at multiple mana costs in the set because it is an X spell. It's an X creature, and it's Goldvein Hydra. Goldvein Hydra is an X and a green for a 0/0 Hydra with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Let that sink in for just a second.
Goodness.
Goldvein Hydra enters with X+1/+1 counters on it. And we're not done. When Goldvein Hydra dies, you create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power.
What were we just talking about?
Which I was just, yeah, exactly. So, even if we're spending 3 mana and getting a 2/2 Goldvein Hydra, it's a 2/2 Vigilance, Trample, Haste. That when it dies, you get to tap treasure tokens to make the next one even bigger. Right? You make this a 5/5. This is standing in front of every dragon and every worm that comes in its way. And then you can sacrifice those treasures to your Magda or to play a 10/10 Goldvein Hydra. Like, it just gets way out of hand once you start chaining these together.
I just love it even as a sweet top deck card.
Yeah.
Like your opponent sweeps the board on like turns 5 through 7 or something. And you're like, great, have a 6 ball. Like, kill it, and I'll just get to play 2 things next turn because I have an extra 5 treasure or whatever, 6 treasure, right? Like, this is a really interesting card. Like, I don't know if it's like as good as all the hype, but like, I can't imagine a world where this card doesn't get played on some level. Like, it's scalable. It fills a bunch of different deck types. It also has vigilance, so it's great in most creature battles. It's good early if you just want to let it die so you can get some treasure, right? Because that's a real thing. You're just like, okay, cool. I'll make a 2/2 attack. I don't care if we trade creatures. Yeah. I'm going to get to play a big like 5 or 6 mana thing the next turn. So like even that's a reasonable option for this card. Like it's pretty sweet.
It's pretty bananas. This was absolutely very close to my list. You have to go look at Rin's Run Hydra from Modern Horizons 2 that just had reach. And it was green and an X ++1 counters on it. Or you could reinforce X by 2 green and X generic mana, discard this creature, put X ++1 counters on target creature. Yep. Cool, whatever. This is just like the best Hydra. I'm looking for a Hydra that's even close. Yeah. Like even close, because Wizards has struggled for so long to make Hydra that doesn't suck, quite frankly. A Hydra that will see some amount of play. A Hydra that, other than the Hydra lovers, there's creature type lovers no matter what it is. But cards that can actually see maybe some competitive play. This is going to see, I think, some competitive play for a variety of reasons. 1, as you mentioned, it fuels every other Hydra behind it. 2, it's just ridiculous upside. And 3, it's great early and it's great late. And those are just the hallmarks of awesome Magic cards. And this card is already pre-ordered for almost $20, probably for a good reason.
Yeah, I think to your point, outside of like Polokranos or whatever, because that's a creature more than a Hydra. Right. But like for the actual like Expel Hydras, I think the only one that really gets any tournament play is Mistcutter Hydra. Right. And that's just because it can't be countered. And it's protection from blue. Like if it wasn't for that,
and Stonecoil Serpent should be a Hydra. Isn't.
Yeah.
That's stolen valor. That's Hydra valor that we've gotten stolen by the snake people.
It's true.
But that's okay. Well,
if you're a Hydra fan, it's good.
If it took them this long to finally make Hydra's great, I'll take it. Because this is really what you need to make green and X. Because you're losing that mana for the mana to power ratio or whatever. And that's become way, way more important than it used to be. And so now if you pay 5 mana, but you only get 4 power out of a creature, it better be bananas. And this is the kind of bananas that you get. Yep. So Power Dragon, what's number 2?
This is another card that made my list reluctantly because I'm going to hate this card because it stops so many fun things that people want to do. But Pest Control.
Yeah.
It's a black and a white sorcery. Destroy all non-land permanents with mana value 1 or less. And just because it also lets you cycle for 2 colorless. Gosh damn this card, man. Like, I mean, I get it. There's a lot of tokens and other things, and like this helps deal with that on some level. But it also stops decks trying to use like blood tokens, treasure tokens, all the maps. Like it turns off a lot of fun things, which is just like, I get it. It kind of has to exist. So you can't sit on those treasure too long without using them. But yeah, it's just a really damn good card.
You know, they put such a high sort of, high bar on things that destroy all mana value, 1 or less permanents. Hitotsugu consumes all was another like, why is this mythic? Why is this mythic? This seems absolutely ridiculous. This card feels like an uncommon. Like, what the hell are we doing making this effect mythic for a black and a white mana? Like, huh?
Well, yeah, rare at worst.
At worst.
Yeah. This card's absurd. I mean, I am going to lose to this card constantly. This card is, I would absolutely hate it if this card were any more common than mythic.
I mean, this card is the main instructor at the No Fun Police Academy. Right. I mean, like, it's just not cool, man.
Yeah.
Like,
and in Commander, it's going to get rid of your Soul Ring, too.
Oh, so many things. So many things this gets rid of.
Yeah. It's just a little bananas. Again, for me, I was just like, why is this mythic? It's already pre-ordered for over $13.
Yeah.
Because
that's why.
Yeah, because you can just cycle it if it's not relevant to the game. So that's the good late part, which is cool. Well, for my number 2, this is certainly, I would consider a very easy shot at what is going to be a standard staple. You're going to play against this, particularly in the Arena Best of 1 queues. I hope you get ready to see the stupid bird, because the bird is the word. Slick Shot Show Off is going to be facing you round after round after round against those stupid red decks, because it's way, way too good otherwise. Slick Shot Show Off is a red and generic mana for a 1/2 rare bird wizard that has flying and haste. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn, which is a little silly, basically double prowess, thanks. But it also has plot. So for red and generic mana, you may pay that and exile this card from your hand, cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost, plot only as a sorcery. Just literally, it's not just the fact that you can do this on curve, and you're not going to necessarily do it on turn 2 per se, because you want to get the +1/+1 counter from the saga or whatever on turn 1, Kimonos, such and such.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Think of this thing just sitting out there. Think of it just sitting out there. You don't have to play it. You're just like, look, I'm going to have this guy over here, and he's going to be hanging out. I'm just going to like do things and attack with little birds and whatever. And, just going to do that until you finally get fed up and start dealing with my creatures, wrathing them, killing them, whatever. And this guy just slam down, bolt you, hit you for 5. Like, what? This card is bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'd say about this card is that the spells decks have struggled a lot. Like everything, they keep making cards that say, oh, when you play your first spell or play a non-creature spell, draw your second card, right? And they're just barely not good enough. Like this card, along with a couple of other things out of the set, feel like this is a real scary deck now. Like now it feels like it has the potential to maybe kill you on like turn 4, right? Like these are real problem cards all of a sudden. And like, this is going to be a key part of a lot of those types of decks.
Plot really helps this card quite a bit too. Like you're able to not just plot it, but plot other stuff. You plot something on turn 2, plot something on turn 3, play 2 of these on turn 4, attack for 10. Like it's evasive. It has haste. It is, it goes with the rest of your deck. It's cheap. I love this card. I'm in love with this card. I will win with this card more than I lose with it because I love this style of gameplay. But yeah, I think this card's great.
I think it's incredibly important this did not have prowess, because you want to be able to kill it with a -2/-2
with a shock.
Or a shock
for
type,
sure.
Something small that gets rid of it, because this thing can get absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, I love me a Kiln Fiend, so I'm happy to go to town with this guy.
Yeah, this card is super pushed. One of the best plot spells, if not the best. Let's move here to our number 1. Now, I share my number 1 with somebody.
Yeah, you do, with me.
Oh, good. So let's let Ruben get his out of the way, and then we'll talk about Outlaws. Ruben?
Well, my number 1 is a card that I think is good. I think it is going to see play. I think that it is going to be good in standard and be a popular card. But more than anything, I think it's important for someone, one of us, to recognize. I almost said our tribal chief, but to identify that Mickey Mouse is still here, that our icon of the game is still around, and that's Jace. And Jace has returned, and we have a very unique Jace in this set, and that is Jace Reawakened. Mm-hmm. Jace Reawakened is 2 blue mana. Just a 2 mana planeswalker for a legendary creature Jace with loyalty of 3, but you can't cast this spell during your first, second, or third turns of the game. So you have to play it on turn 4 or after. But for that low price, you get +1, draw a card, then discard a card. +1, you may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted. And -6, until end of turn, whenever you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. There's lots of interesting things happening here. +1 plot something is mana positive kind of immediately. Mm-hmm. Looting is almost always good. And as a Sarah Avenger aficionado, not getting to play a 2-drop until turn 4 is fine. We're still going to get to protect this. There's a new Quench in this set, for example. We're still going to be able to, establish a board state to be able to play a Jace. Playing this on turn 6 with a 4-drop is also a super reasonable option. So I think that Jace Reawakened has a chance to be very powerful.
Yeah, I see this card, and I'm like, part of me says, this can do a lot of things for those decks that want it. The other part of me is like, what do I want to be doing on turn 4, 5, or 6? Right? And I think that's the part I can't figure out. But somebody who's into the control realm of decks is probably going to find a lot of good things to do with this. I think the decks just shift to being able to take advantage of Jace a little bit more.
I think this card's terrible. I'm sorry. I think this card's bad. Wow. I think the restriction is too much. I think the payoff isn't high enough. I hate to poo-poo, I don't want to yuck your yum. I hope it works out. Man. I like Magic cards being awesome. Maybe it's awesome and I'm terrible.
I also like Jace being awesome.
I like Jace being awesome too. And it's pre-ordering nice and high, so people are clearly excited about the card. I'm just like, you gotta have to show me on this one.
I mean, I'll admit, the most recent Jace we got is still being played a bunch. Like, that thing's still crazy.
Yeah.
Being able to mill people and turn creatures off effectively during the attack step. Like,
yep.
And I don't know if the new Jace has room with those other cards existing, because you're still playing like Wandering Emperors and things like that. So like, I don't know.
Right. And, and there's some argument that, it's really good late, particularly maybe in control battles when you guys are just, it's about card advantage. It's about
that's really where this thing shines, I think, is turn 6 alongside 4 untapped mana.
So you can, you can protect it. You can make sure that they're not able to do anything with it themselves. You're able to plot something that's relevant and say go. And we'll see. And I hope so. You
can plot another Jace.
This is true.
Could even be a boat. Sorry,
could be a boat. Power Dragon, tell us about our number 1, and I'll read what it does.
Well, yeah. So this card, gosh damn, like this is another one that. Instant speed sweeper. That's really the thing that's got everybody's attention on this card. But honestly, and I'll let you read them off, I think the other 2 modes are going overlooked on this card because they're both actually really good and may not necessarily need to even go in a control type build. I think this can actually go into some other stuff too that people haven't really been considering.
The card is just bananas, and was bananas from the moment that I think, it was debuted as one of the first cards they showed off, because Final Showdown is real. It's very, very real. For 1 white mana, it is an instant mythic spree card. So here we go. For +1 generic mana, all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. And remember, if you pay all the mana, you get all these things in a row. +1 generic mana gives you choose a creature you control. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Or for an additional 2 white and 3 generic mana, so for 6 total, instant speed, destroy all creatures. So if you pay the full boat, the 5 to destroy, and the 6 and the 7 and the 8, pay all 8 mana, the first thing that happens is that everything loses their abilities. Then you get to choose something that gains indestructible, and then everything else dies. And that's a hell of a swing, no matter how you slice it.
This is Cyclonic Rift in white. This is Dress Down in white, although you don't get to draw a card. This is a combat trick early. This is a board sweeper late, all at instant speed. It's the final showdown. I love it.
Like, imagine attacking in and your opponent goes to block with a bunch of stuff and you're like, oh yeah, your stuff doesn't have death touch anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some silly things that can happen with this card, or something just gets indestructible just because, right? Use it defensively as well.
I can make shoulder lose death touch. Is that what
right there you go.
Okay, just
that's one you could do.
That's okay. I'm good with that.
Or save yourself on that last turn where you only have 1 or 2 life and you're just like, hold up a second.
Upkeep final showdown.
Upkeep final showdown. I'll do it. 6 mana to get rid of everything. Thanks, bye. I mean, gosh, this card is nuts. Clearly one of the best cards in the set, I think. They put it out front and center, like when they're doing their first previews, and it's great. And that said, that is our top 10 Outlaws of Thunder Junction cards. You'll see them on the screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Power Dragon's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to highlight during our next top 10. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Power Dragon.
Hey, as always, fun to be here, and this set looks like it's going to be pretty bonkers.
Thank you, Ruben.
Hey, stay safe out there on the dusty trails, and enjoy Outlaws of Thunder Junction, everybody.
Yeah, it looks great. I want to move here to our final slide as we ride into the sunset. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. Use the code MagicMikes at checkout for 5% off your order. Our co-sponsor, ManaTraders.com. My co-hosts, Power Dragon and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at patreon.com/MagicMikes.
So I hate to interrupt the outro, but the little doggies that I'm dog sitting are here to bother me. So it is hot time to hit the dusty trail.
Wow. Well, that said, follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at MagicMikes or YouTube, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast or TikTok, our Magic Mike subreddit, like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.